Hello, leaders. We had an incredible week last week where we hosted the virtual conference, Collective Conversations, Coaching the Comeback. We were amazed about how many of the hundreds of leaders that showed up to the webinar. We were grateful for the experts that shared all of their expertise in their specific areas. And then finally, we all learned so much that we could go back and take to our teams and organizations. It was an amazing week. Now, when we do anything at the Collective, you know that we have a very specific purpose and an order we put everything through so it can build over the 4 days. Well, we did that again. And what we did is we started in the mind. We talked about the systems and the paradigms and the designs that are out there that might need to be flipped over or changed because of what's going on right now. Next, we talked through the heart, and we went down to the heart that talks about our emotions and our feelings, and we need to show up for ourselves so that we can show up for our teams and our leaders in our organization. Then we moved over to the soul so we could find deeper meaning and perspective in our stories inside of this, because we're all crafting a story. And then we finally went into strength, where we talked about what are the actions and behaviors and what exactly we're going to do and how do we link this all together. Well, what I also just did is there's a very specific order we put that in. And we always start where we learn. Right? In our mind, we think about it and we go through all that. And then we move down into the heart, which is also known for experience, because we experience ourselves when we're our truest self, knowing who we are. And then we moved over to the soul, which is also integration. How do we create the meaning and perspective? All that inside the soul quadrant so then we can create a compelling vision for the future. And then finally, we moved back into the strength quadrant, which is execution. But what you see as you go that way through it, learn to experience, to integrate, to execute, is you get this long-term transformation we all desire and an easier way to produce change inside your organization. I know all of us need that right now. So we've put together a highlight reel of all of the things and the best and biggest topics that we took out of each one of the speakers. So if you want to hear each expert's conversation in its entirety, and I really suggest that you do, please go to our website and you can find the entire webinar there. But for now, what we're going to do is you're going to be able to see some of the highlights, deepest impact moments, and key takeaways each expert had from our conversation. So enjoy these highlights from Coaching the Comeback.
So, as most leaders started this year with kind of well-laid plans and strategies for their leaders, Cassie, and the organization, what are you seeing in terms of those shifting in the current environment and kind of down the road? What are some of those shifts that, that is being made, for them?
Well, what I'm seeing in the chat is exactly what I'm hearing. And we started out first quarter of the year with most of us in a bull market strategy for growth, or evolution, or digitizing, or adjacent products and services. And now with everything shut down essentially for the last 2 months, and all of the all industries are learning so much what's really needed to survive. And so the best laid plans, as you say, Brad, are basically put on the shelf and being reworked in the middle of crisis management. So every leader has got two parts of their brain. They've got keep the lights on, put the right policies in place, adapt workforce policies and time and management and pay. Maybe people are taking pay cuts to try to survive the lack of revenue. So all of that, we'll call it what you have in your mind quadrant. Mm-hmm. And then the second is, what is our strategic plan for our business? Have we seen as much as we can get from this market or from this product? How do we predict which way it's going to go? And it really is a matter of, I've been using some of the Gartner matrices on product portfolio and local market and understanding what customers need, really staying in tune with customers. And there's some degree of, which way is the wind going to blow, and having about 5 different scenarios and evaluating those scenarios on a cadence every 2 weeks. What are we seeing with the increase in revenue or decrease? What's the market indices doing? What's unemployment doing? What is, if it's a food industry, what are the customers doing? Are we seeing, and that's a really important point. You're going to hear me make this over and over again. Knowing yourself and how you feel, you started with that up front, knowing your people. your customers and your employees, and it's a whole new baseline. So what we knew about our customers and our employees in 2019 and going into 2020, it's the whole baseline is shifting. And so one of the actions, and I'll say this again and again, is to re-baseline. And you have to continually keep a pulse on what are your employees able to do, and what capabilities can you grow, and what are your customers going to need. We know for sure it's going to be digital.
Sure.
We know for sure it's going to be digital. And the third is to be intellectually honest. So smoke and mirrors won't work with your employee base. If you promised them something 2 months ago and now it can't happen, it's better to say 2 months ago, that's what I knew, that's what I planned on. And I can't uphold that now because here's what's changed. Intellectually honest and having that balance of aspiration and reality check, and don't make any promises. I wish the only promise you can make is I will care about you, I will listen to you, and you can trust me. That's it. Employment, revenue, job, you can't. None of us can ever promise that. So just be really thoughtful about, and intellectually honest is my third point, about what you can promise and using your mind.
Well,
which means by definition, physiologically, this is going to be backward for what some people have common knowledge has sort of taught us. It's this: we feel before we think. That we are physiological feeling creatures that have feelings about our life before we ever have thoughts about our life. And then we try to figure out with what we think about what we feel about what we experienced. Which means all of life is we have feelings first and then try to figure it out second. So if you don't know what to do with what you feel, or if you become numb to what you're feeling, it's what you've done to deal with a world that you cannot control and don't know how to manage. And so you're trying you're trying to stay away from the vulnerability of those feelings about your life, which is how you become not in touch with what's happening in your limbic brain. And then you kind of resort to the cognitive side of you to go, well, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to do the right thing. And you're trying to really overpower the humanness of you that then turns you into a tin man who's disconnected from his heart. But there's so much about us being outwardly focused to care for the needs of others. Here's what I want to say. You cannot be outwardly focused until you're inwardly aware. So Olympic world, you can get 97% of human performance through shame and guilt, which is really around fear and shame. The problem is in the Olympic world, that 3% from 97 to 100 is the difference between I don't know your name versus you're even on the Olympic team, let alone you're on the medal stand. So the Olympic world's been trying to figure out how do we get the other 3%? And I'm going to tell you what all the research shows about how we're made is that you only get 100% of a human being in an environment where they belong and matter, which we call where they experience unconditional love, which means they can come into a room and be themselves. And when that athlete can compete secure in that, you get 100% of the athlete. The problem is the Olympic world doesn't know how to coach that way because we're not parented that way, we're not coached that way, and we don't lead that way. And we settle for the 97%. What you're describing is how to find that 3% that teams actually, when you meet our greatest human need, which is to belong and matter and to connect, when that need's being met, that's when people run through walls. And that's when performance accelerates, not just on the Olympic track or in the pool, but like in business and in families.
A phrase that I like is fully human, fully alive. And so these dimensions of reality are found in ancient literature. It's called the Great Commandment sometimes, to come into your fullness of mind, heart, soul, and strength. So the upper quadrants kind of represent the kind of the analytical problem solving, driven part of us. And then the lower quadrants, the heart and the soul, are those parts of us that give us depth, that give us meaning. That's where our stories and kind of the vision of our lives come from. And one of the principles that I try to follow here is that integration will lead to transformation.
Mm.
But what happens in our culture is kind of reliance on information. Like if we give you enough information, enough knowledge, enough expertise, that will be enough to motivate you or help you grow or develop or change. And sometimes in our culture, inspiration is relied upon. Like if you're inspired, you're kind of moved by a concert or music or a keynote speaker, that will make a difference in your life. And I think information and inspiration has its value, but it's not nearly as powerful as integration. So I want to take you through some leadership language around the quadrants that lead to what we're talking about.
Okay.
It's like in the mind quadrant, we're hoping to develop the capacity of the leader. And in the soul quadrant, the character of the leader. So the capacity to lead and the character to inspire brings us to the compassion of the heart to serve the people in our organizations. But then if we proceed further and integrate the work of the heart, we actually have the courage to act. So the difference between bravado or making snap decisions or kind of these analytical spreadsheet decisions with true integrated embodied leadership is we have the courage to act, and it's compelling because we've embodied the process that inspires others to follow us.
I'm quoting here this article. It says, corporations have become victims of the great training robbery. American companies are spending enormous amounts of money on employees' training and education. $160 billion in the United States and close to $356 billion globally in 2015 alone. But check this last part. They are not getting a good return on their investment. For the most part, learning doesn't lead to better organizational performance. People soon revert back to their own way of things. I want you to read that last statement because it ties into what we've done with these four kind of movements. It emphasizes the predominant approach to most of the leadership culture that we know: learning and performance. Okay, now their conclusion is still a short-sighted conclusion. Well, it's a great conclusion. Learning and performance and the way we're going about it is not working. And so what have we done the last 4 days? I'm kind of tying this up. I'm in this performance category. I'm in the action category. But if I showed up today and taught you something and then told you to do it, I would only be emphasizing the current leadership culture. And apparently 11% of the executives think that's working, and most of the industry thinks it's failing. So we live in a mind to strength world. Like that, if I was to define it in our terms, that is a mind to strength term. And this is what it says: think smarter and work harder. Well, how's that going for you in this global pandemic? Like, how's that working out? Think smarter and work harder. Do you need to do those things? Yes. Do you just need to do those two things in that order? I was going to say the jury's out. The jury's already in. The answer's no. Mm-hmm. So apparently it's not working before, and it's sure as heck not going to work during a global pandemic to think better and work harder.
Sure.
Quick win. People go, we want a quick win. You don't even know why you're winning. They want a quick win. Well, you get a quick win because you want to be motivated, but you don't even know why you're motivated. What I would say to people is, what's the alternative? Like, if you don't want to do this, what is the alternative? And it's not a judgmental spirit. The part of I understand, like, you've got to survive. I get it. But I'm just saying, in the long run, I promise you now, your employees will be damaged emotionally and mentally and physically for at least a decade to come. Like, we're not going to snap out of the last few months. So what choice do you have but to begin to lean into heart and soul, to get good at it? And like I said in the beginning, do it for yourself. Because if you're trying to teach someone how to have a heart, or if you're trying to teach them how to have a soul, it's not going to work. You're going to have to recover your own so that you can have something else to give them. So come on the journey. I don't think you've got a choice. The mental health crisis. When's the media when they just like poke stuff to make, I don't know what it's called, but I'm not here to poke a fire or poke a bear, as you would say. I'm just telling you, there's a mental health crisis coming that the executive CEO has had the privilege of not having to deal with up to now, and they will not have the privilege or the luxury of not being able to face that. So the quicker they show up to do their own work, the more realistic they'll be able to be available and ready and capable of helping others do what? Execute, but execute differently.
As you can see, there were so many things from this week we were excited about, leaders took away, and I'm already hearing they're doing with their teams and organizations. We just wanted to do this for you so that we can walk with you as you go into this next back half of the year. When you looked back on what you just watched, there were some key takeaways. There was also some collective offerings out there that we do to help you. We'd love if you're interested to schedule a 30-minute call to talk about how we can help you, maybe the leaders in your organization, the teams, and your overall organization on how you can implement some of the things you just heard into what you're going to do the back half of 2020. Thank you again so much for tuning in, for watching this recap video, and I challenge you to go dig deeper so you can coach the comeback.